Hey, I want to welcome you here at our Woodbury campus, those of you in Eagan, Cottage Grove, and Hastings as well. So glad you're with us this weekend. I got to visit my hometown a few months ago back in Ohio. I took a little trip to visit my family, and between my two sisters and their husbands, together, they have 6 kids. They have 6 kids. So it's important for me to get back there from time to time so that my daughter, Gianna, can visit with her cousins and get to know them a little bit better. But more importantly, I like to get back to Ohio so that I can continue to reinforce the narrative that Uncle Jamie is the coolest guy on the planet. Which this last trip to Ohio, I was able to take to a whole nother level. The first night that I was there, we were gathered at one of my sister's houses, and they brought out this little box that looked like a miniature video game system. And I'd heard about these things before, but I'd never seen one in the wild. So I looked at it closely, and it looked like an old Nintendo game system. And so they informed me that this little bitty box had all of the old school Nintendo games on it. And so I got really excited. I asked the kids, hey, boot this up, and they started taking turns playing the original Nintendo game, the best video game of all time, Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario. They were playing it, and I got to tell you that they were absolutely terrible at it. They were horrible. I mean, totally horrible. They couldn't even get past the first level. And so not knowing if I still had it in me, I asked them calmly, I said, hey guys, can Uncle Jamie take a turn? So they gave me the second controller, and it was on like Donkey Kong, except it wasn't Donkey Kong. So I grabbed the controller, and I worked my way through World 1-1 and 1-2, and then I went to the secret area and warped to World 4, and they were all like, Uncle Jamie, you're amazing. How did you know that there was a secret area there? And I'm like, because I'm Uncle Jamie. That's how it happens. And then I was in World 4-1 and 4-2, and I found the secret beanstalk that warps you to World 8, and they're like, Uncle Jamie, you're amazing. We can't believe all this. And then a few more levels, I hit the final stage, and boom, Uncle Jamie saves the princess. It was amazing. Look at that. Even with Luigi. I've never done it with Luigi. This is the first time. And like when that happened, I mean, my nieces and nephews, like with one voice were crying out, Uncle Jamie, you are our hero. Uncle Jamie, you're who we want to be when we grow up. Uncle Jamie, you are Nintendo God. And I'm like, yes, I'm Uncle Jamie. This is how it goes with me. And so as I sat there, like in utter victory, it was a beautiful moment. And I was blowing the minds of my little nieces and nephews, but in the midst of all that, something struck me. 2 realities, in fact, struck me in that particular moment in front of that little bitty TV. 2 things popped into my mind. The first one was this. Muscle memory is a powerful thing. No joke. I haven't played Super Mario Brothers in 30 years. And I was able in 2 tries to beat the whole thing just from muscle memory. It's a powerful thing. But the second thing that struck me in that moment was this reality. That it has now become my turn to influence this next generation. It's now become my turn. It's now my job to make a difference in the lives of those who are coming after me. And when it comes to my family, I know this. I am who I am because of the family that came before me. I am who I am because of what they did, my family before. But now, the family that's coming after me is going to be what it is going to be to some degree because of what I am doing right now. In other words, I am in the process of becoming someone else's previous generation. And guess what? So are you. So are you. If you're taking notes today, I would encourage you just to write this down, that you are who you are because of your family in the past. We know that. We know that to be true, but it's also true that your family in the future will be what it will be because of what you are doing right now. You, me, we are becoming someone else's previous generation. You and I, we are going to be a snapshot in someone's mind someday. Oh yeah. I had a great aunt. I totally remember her when I was a little girl. That's gonna be you. That's gonna be you. Oh yeah, I had a great grandpa. Yeah, I remember him. We used to wrestle all the time. He was a smelly guy. Hopefully that won't be you, but it probably will be you, right? My uncle, he was the greatest uncle ever, coolest guy on the planet. He was the best at Super Mario Brothers. Right? It's going to happen. I mean, we have a future family, and you and I are currently in the process of making our mark on them. You see, what you're doing right now is going to impact the next generation. The issue isn't if you will influence your future family, but rather how you are going to do it. And so, in my opinion, to answer that question, we need to go back to the main character of this series that we've been looking at in every week. This guy by the name of Joseph. When it comes to this reality that we will influence the next generation, figuring out how we're going to do it, I don't know that there is a better example of how this happens than through his life. And I want to show you that today. So if you've got a Bible, an online Bible, an app, whatever, go ahead and open that up to Genesis chapter 42. If you got a physical Bible or you need one, it's in the seat rack in front of you. Genesis chapter 42, because my goal today is to show you something maybe that you've never seen before in his story. But I think it answers our question, how we best impact this next generation. Now, if this is your first week of the series, let me just catch you up a little bit on Joseph's life here. Joseph is one of 12 brothers, which on the surface isn't that big of a deal. It doesn't sound that bad. I mean, there are a lot of Amish families and Catholic families that are that large. That the size of the family is not the issue. It's the fact that these kids came from 4 different baby mamas. That's the problem. Now, for many reasons other than his polygamy, Joseph's dad, a guy by the name of Jacob, he was a horrible, horrible father. And one of the reasons that he was so bad as a dad is because he ranked his kids. Joseph was his favorite kid because he was the firstborn child from his favorite wife. Men, how many of you have a favorite wife? No, don't raise your hand. That's not an answer. That was bad. Don't do that. You don't want to have a favorite wife unless, well, I guess if you can't love the one you love the one you're with, right? Or whatever. That's in the Bible somewhere. Anyway, now, to demonstrate his affection for Joseph, what Jacob did is he bought him this amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which made all of his brothers, Joseph's brothers, made them jealous of him. So much so, and plus other things that happened, they hated him. All the brothers hated Joseph, and they wanted to kill him. But instead, they settled on selling him into slavery. And so he goes off to Egypt, and eventually in Egypt, he finds a bit of his way. And the drama, though, unfortunately doesn't stop. In Genesis chapter 39 through 41, what we begin to see is God supernaturally repositioning Joseph to save the entire nation of Egypt from an unexpected famine. But it's during those 3 chapters, 39, 40, and 41, during that time, we don't hear a peep about Joe's kinsmen. We don't hear a peep about his kinfolk at all. They don't show up on the scene again until chapter 42. They show up again in the storyline. This time, though, they are heading to Egypt. They're going to Egypt because they need to buy some food for their families. And when they get to Egypt, they unknowingly find themselves bowing down before Joseph, begging him to do something to save their life. But they don't know who they're bowing down to. They don't recognize him. But for Joseph, this scene, for many reasons, is a familiar scene. He's seen this situation a few times before. You see, for Joseph, what's happening here feels a lot like déjà vu. So look at chapter 42, Genesis chapter 42, verse 5. It says this. So Jacob's sons, which is also Joseph's brothers, Jacob's sons arrive in Egypt along with the others to buy food, for the famine was in Canaan as well. The famine was so great it had gone into surrounding areas. Verse 6, since Joseph was governor of all Egypt, he was essentially the prime minister of Egypt at that time. Joseph was in charge of selling grain to all the people. And so it was to him that his brothers came. When they arrived, they bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. They didn't know who it was him. But, verse 7, look at this. Joseph recognized his brothers instantly. Dun, 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 right? This is a twist in the storyline. Because at this point in the story, Joseph is now 39 years old. He's 39 years old when this story I just read is happening, which means it's been 22 years since he's last seen his brothers face to face. But now they're bowing down before him. There they are, right there, face to the ground, in a posture that's defenseless, in a posture, in a position that is vulnerable, just ready for Joseph to exact his revenge on them. And since they don't recognize him, they wouldn't even see it coming. Joseph's got him right where he wants him to get his revenge. And so the question that Joe's got to answer right now is simply this. What do you do? What do you do when you've got the power to settle the score? What do you do when you have the ability to get even with those who have harmed you or hurt you? Because he is in a position right now to absolutely annihilate them. You see, with one word, they sent him into slavery. With one word right now, he could send them into slavery. With one word, he could send them to prison, and no one would ever see them again. All it would take is 1 second for Joseph to destroy their lives, just like they tried to destroy his life 22 years ago. And I'm sure in that moment, as they're bowed down before him, he remembers how they tried to ruin his life. I'm sure he remembers their voices as he sat trapped in the bottom of that cistern, not knowing what they were planning to do, thinking the whole time that they were just going to kill him. I'm sure that he remembers the smiles and the laughs as they end up cutting a deal with the Midianite traders to sell him. I'm sure he remembers the clinking of the silver coins as the brothers were paid for his freedom. I'm sure he remembers the total lack of concern for him on that day. And I am sure that he remembers all the reasons he would be justified in settling this score. He would be justified in getting even with them. I'm sure he remembers all those things. But this time that he remembers, this time 22 years ago, I submit to you, was not all that Joseph remembers in this moment. You see, I think that he remembers something else as well. I think he remembers a very specific scene from his childhood that almost mirrors this current reality. And as Joseph connects the dots from this scene in his early childhood with this moment right now, as he connects those dots, it becomes yet another moment of déjà vu for him. And that moment from his childhood that he remembers is one we want to look at. And to look at it, we've got to go back a little bit to see what happened. We have to go back one generation to look at the lives of Joseph's dad and Joseph's uncle. We've got to turn the page of history back just a little bit so that we can look at the lives of a guy named Jacob, Joseph's dad, and his brother, Jacob's brother Esau, which was Joseph's uncle. We've got to look at the lives of these two guys. And we don't have time to go into all the details of this story, but starting in chapter 25, there are two strange encounters where Jacob, Joseph's dad, stole everything from Jacob's brother, Esau, which is Joseph's uncle. He stole everything from him. Through his cunning, through his deception, Jacob is able to literally strip Esau of his entire inheritance. He's able to take away Esau's authority as the head of the family for the next generation. He is able to strip away Esau's future position as boss of the family business. Jacob is able to steal everything from his brother Esau. And when he does, Esau is essentially kicked out of the family. Esau is out. He's out of money. He's out of authority. He's out of favor with his father. And Esau, Joseph's uncle, he abhors Jacob. He hates him, so much so that he's willing to kill him. Genesis chapter 27, verse 41 says this: "From that time on, Esau hated Jacob, and Esau began to scheme, 'I will soon be mourning my father's death. Then I will kill my brother Jacob.'" Jacob's thinking to himself, this guy has stolen everything from me, but when my dad dies, when I'm done mourning my dad's death, I'm going to kill my brother. I'm going to kill Jacob for what he did to me. And when I kill my brother Jacob, I will get back what is rightfully mine, and Jacob will finally get what he deserves. So, as a result of this impending death sentence, Jacob flees the scene before his father dies. And for the next 20 years, Jacob, Joseph's dad, he's in hiding for this whole time. And it was during these 2 decades of hiding that Jacob finally finds his 4 baby mamas and has 11 kids. And one of those is Joseph. Also during that time, Jacob wasn't just busy making babies, he was also busy making money. Making himself some mucho dinero, some cabbage, some cheddar, some stacks, some G's, some Benjamins, some bills, some banks. He was busy creating incredible wealth for himself and his family. But at the end of that 20-year exile, God speaks to Jacob and he tells him to do the unthinkable. Genesis chapter 31:3 says this: "Then the Lord said to Jacob, 'Return to the land of your father. After this 20 years is up, return to the land of your father and grandfather, and,'" look at this, "'and to your relatives there.'" Including Esau? Yeah. But God says, "Don't worry, I will be with you." Now, no doubt, hearing that from God, Jacob would have said in that moment, "God, you better be with me." You had better be with me, because if Esau is the same Esau I ran away from 20 years ago, not only will he kill me, he will kill all my sons. And then he will take my wives as his wives. Not only that, he will also take away all my property. And when he sees the wealth that I'm bringing back home, it will be more than he will be able to handle. Esau will inevitably think to himself, "At last, God has vindicated me, because my deceiver of a brother Jacob is actually bringing back to me all the wealth that he stole from me when we were kids." You see, what's happening here is something that everybody in Jacob's family would have understood. Jacob's family knew about the Esau situation. They knew this whole situation, and they knew what this whole situation was going to mean for them. That God was calling them back home, but they knew there was great risk in going back home. They knew that heading back to their homeland would probably be a death sentence for all of them. "Daddy, are we going back to see Uncle Esau?" "Yeah." "Isn't that dangerous?" "Extremely dangerous." "Is he going to kill us?" "Probably." But God says we have to go back. And so Jacob packs up everybody, and he packs up everything, and he heads back home. And of course, Esau hears they are coming. And so he decides to send a welcome wagon their way. Genesis chapter 33, verse 1 says this: Then Jacob looked up as they were traveling back to their homeland. As he looked up, he saw Esau coming with 400 men. Now, these 400 men are not all the uncles ready to tell all stories and catch up with these guys. No, this is an army that Esau is bringing in this moment. He looked up and he saw Esau coming with 400 men. And so Esau is on the way. Jacob anticipates what he is going to do, so he comes up with a plan. Look at his plan. He divides the children among Leah, his second favorite wife, Rachel, his favorite wife, and the two servant wives. I've got a plan here. I'm gonna put my least favorite wife and kids out front, and then my second favorite wife behind, and then my first favorite wife and son, and so they can run if Esau starts attacking the front line. I've got a plan here. So he put the servant wives and their children in front, and Leah and her children next. And I want to stop here before I read the next 5 words, because as I've been following along in this series, preparing for this message, as I was rereading this scenario, the next 5 words jumped out to me in a way that I had never seen before. It just floored me as I was reading through this. The next 5 words floored me. I'd never noticed it this way before. But because of the series, I saw it in a new light. And I want to show it to you. Look at the rest of the sentence. He put the wives and their children in front, Leah and the children next, and Rachel and Joseph last. And Rachel and Joseph last. Now, what jumped out to me in this moment was the fact that Joseph is the only one of the 11 sons mentioned by name here. And I think it's important that we notice that he is clearly mentioned here, because the author of this account wants to make sure that we know that Joseph saw what happens next. So what happens next? Genesis 33:3 says this: Then Jacob went on ahead. As he approached his brother Esau, he bowed down to the ground 7 times before him. Sound familiar? Then Esau ran to meet him and what? Not struck him, not got revenge, not got even, not even killed him. Esau ran to meet him and embraced him. He threw his arms around his neck and he kissed him. And they both wept. You see, Joseph was mentioned specifically by name here because we need to know that Joseph, specifically had a front row seat to this situation. And I am sure that Joseph never forgot what he saw that day. I am positive that Joseph never forgot what happened that day, because that was the day that Joseph did not die. That was the day that Joseph's family did not die. And most shockingly, that was the day that Joseph's dad did not die by the hand of his brother. You see, Joseph would never forget that day, because that was the day he saw Uncle Esau spare his brother's life. And on that day, there was a reconciliation that no one expected and no one deserved. That was the day he saw his uncle Esau spare his dad, Esau's brother, Jacob. And he would never, ever, ever forget that day. And now 30 years later, here stands Joseph with his brothers spread out before him with their faces to the ground. And he's got the power of life and death in his hands. And in that moment, Joseph chooses to do for his brothers what he saw his uncle do for his brother, Joseph's dad, Jacob. And just like Uncle Esau, Joseph lets his brothers live. He gives them mercy, even though they didn't deserve it. As you continue to follow the story, Joseph eventually reveals himself to his brothers. He tells them who he is. He says, you know what? I may walk like an Egyptian. I may talk like an Egyptian. But look, guys, I'm really a Hebrew. I am your long-lost brother. And on that day, there was a reconciliation that no one expected and no one deserved. And that's exactly where we're going to pick up the story next week in more detail. But today, Crossroads, here's the idea that I want us to think about for the next few minutes that we have together. Here's the idea. Actions don't just speak louder than words. Sometimes they echo into the next generation. What we saw from Esau to Joseph illustrates this point that sometimes actions don't just speak louder than words. Sometimes they ripple out into, sometimes they reverberate into, sometimes they echo into the next generation. You see, friends, what your children and what your grandchildren and what your nieces and nephews see you do in hard situations will lay the groundwork for what they do when they face similar struggles themselves. They will forget about almost everything that you say, but they will never, ever, ever forget who you were and what you did when the right thing was the difficult thing to do. They won't remember what you say, but they will remember who you are and what you do. And so as we think about our echo into the next generation, I want us to spend a few moments with God evaluating what that echo actually is. So at all of our campuses, I just want you to close your eyes and bow your head and just think about some of the questions that I'm going to bring up in our final few minutes together today. So just bow your head, close your eyes, and ask God to open your heart to answer some of these questions. So dads, grandfathers, uncles, let me ask you, what if what you are doing right now in your life is the thing your sons and your grandsons or your nephews, what if the thing you're doing is what they take their cue from for how they live their life? What if it's you that they look to as their pattern of behavior? What if you are the role model for how they treat their future wife, your future daughter-in-law? What if they look to you as the role model for how to do that? What if you are the model for how they raise their kids or your grandkids? What if you are the model for how they deal with extraordinary temptation in their life in this world? What if you are the model for how they respond to crisis in their life? Dads, grandfathers, uncle, what if they take their cue from you? You see, odds are they will. So moms, grandmas, aunts, let me ask you. What if your daughters, what if your granddaughters, what if your nieces take their cues from you for how they treat or how they talk to or how they respond to their future husband? What if they're looking to you for a lead on how to do that? What if they take their cue from you on how they will raise their children? What if they look to you to figure out how they are supposed to view money or success or beauty or their body? Moms, grandmas, aunts, what if you are their role model for how they understand their relationship with God? I mean, what if we are all building a life right now that will influence how our future families decide to build their life? What if what you're doing right now is going to determine what the next generation will eventually do with their life? Because the reality is you are doing that. You will do that. And although you won't be around probably to see the full implications of your decisions and your actions, that doesn't mean that this is not important stuff. Because the reality is their decisions will be made with the imprint of your life in their minds. Actions don't just speak louder than words. Sometimes they echo into the next generation. So the question for all of us today is simply this: what will echo out of your life and into this next generation? So important to ask this, so powerful to answer this. Because whatever you want to echo out of your life someday is something that you can start building into your life right now. You can make the best decision now. You can respond to temptation now. You can get help now. You can manage your money now. You can respond to relationship issues now. And when you choose to do that, your actions will reverberate into your future family and into this next generation. See, whatever you need to start building into your life, whatever you need to do it now. So will you? Personally, I pray that you will. Because the next generation is depending on what you decide to do right now.